Hi everybody, welcome to Live at Lunch. We're here showcasing businesses that get an edge in the market through digital technology and digital innovation. I'm Adam, I'm a Managing Director at Tallan, and joining me today is Bill Packer. He's the Chief Operating Officer at American Financial Resources, or AFR. Bill, you've had quite a career in mortgage lending. I was hoping you could share a little bit about that story and how you ended up at AFR.
Sure. Thanks, Adam, and thanks for having me here today. It's nice to see you and have an opportunity to share some of my insights with you and those watching us today. So I've been in the mortgage industry almost my entire career, which spans something like 30 years. About half that time at mid-sized companies, so companies, think of them 200 to 1,000 employees, and about half of my career at the very largest institutions, places like Bank of America, for example, which was my most recent employer before coming into American Financial Resources. I actually retired from Bank of America. So I'm a Bank of America retiree. I spent 2 days in retirement, and then on Monday, after I retired on Friday, came to work at AFR first as our Chief Information Officer, and then recently promoted to the Chief Operating Officer role.
So across all those opportunities, where do you think you've had the chance to be the most innovative?
Yeah, it's a great question. So clearly for me, as I look back on my career, it is the mid-size space that has afforded me the most opportunity to be innovative and experimental. Financial services in general, and certainly mortgage banking in particular, is a highly regulated industry. And so in the very largest of institutions, there are many, I don't want to call them roadblocks, but there is a lot of resistance to new and different experimentation because of the regulatory oversight and internal audit controls and those kinds of things. As you get into the mid-size space, those barriers still exist, but you can have more forthright conversations with your regulators as well as your board, and you can agree to take some well thought out, careful steps into some innovative spaces. So for example, one of the things that Tallan helped us with was our Compare My Rate product. So coming out of the financial crisis, one of the laws that got put in place had a regulation in it that required all lending institutions that are lending on in the mortgage space to create this thing called a loan estimate. And it's so that the borrower could compare different offerings from different institutions. We collaborated with Tallan and said, this is an opportunity for us to take this form that folks may get 2 or 3 or 4 of these from different institutions, scan them, using OCR technology, extract important information, and then give the potential applicant a response back as to whether AFR, or our consumer division, which is eLend, whether AFR can meet or beat that offer, or if the offer they have in hand is better and they should proceed forward. And so that's a patent pending technology that we were able to experiment with, and I think we stood that project up in 7 or 8 months.
Yeah, pretty quickly.
And pretty quickly, yeah, and relatively inexpensively. I think for some other reasons we're going to get to later in the broadcast here, but that was an example of something that we were able to innovate very quickly, which would have been much tougher at a larger institution. But you can do it in a mid-sized space. Sat down with the CEO and our board and said, hey, this is something we want to do, and got the green light, got the funding, and away we went.
Yeah, less layers to cut through.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
So transformation is a big piece, and digital transformation is a big buzzword today. Like any buzzword, though, it's going to mean different things to different people. When I think of the AFR story, I think of it very literally. You've got mortgages historically being a very people and paper-intensive process. Anybody that's gotten a mortgage, say more than 10 years ago, knows what that was like. And yet here you now have turned it into hopefully a better experience for the borrower, and at the same time, as much a better experience for the employees inside the bank, right? Because if you succeed on your customer experience and you end up getting all this new business, if your folks internally are not prepared, then that's obviously going to cause some problems and be more costly ultimately than it needed to be. When you got to AFR, as you mentioned, there was a mission there to innovate, and the team brought in executives like yourself from different backgrounds and put that sort of group together to lead that transformation. Can you talk a little bit about some of those initial meetings and discussions, and when you look at, I could do anything, where do you decide where to invest, and how do you kind of make those decisions?
Right. When I joined the company in the summer of 2015, the direction was we wanted to dramatically change the experience, principally of the customer who's applying with us. As we started to discuss that, we realized that really throughout the entire lending chain, there are many actors who interact with us. Appraisal companies, if you're doing a renovation loan, there might be a consultant or an inspector. There's a title company. If you're self-employed, or even if you're not self-employed, sometimes you might have your accountant interacting with us. There's a realtor who's interacting with us. If it's a construction loan, there might be a builder who's interacting with us. So there's many people who are interacting with us through the course of originating or creating that mortgage loan that starts with an application and ends with a closing. And we wanted to really look at that whole value chain and say, at every step of the way, how do we digitize the experience so that it is and becomes an online experience to the extent possible within appropriate guardrails of protecting privacy and those information security and those kinds of things you have to do. So we started at the front end of the process. And I can say, although we started in 2015, we're recording this sort of at the tail end of 2018, and we're not done yet. We still have areas that we need to march through, but we've made pretty good progress in terms of changing that experience. And when we go to shows and other places, we hear from people that they love the technology experience. Now, for American Financial Resources, it was never the case that we wanted to direct how that interaction would occur. We want the person who's interacting with us to make that decision. So if you want to, as a consumer, say, if you want to apply with us digitally, that's great. You want to start digitally and call us on the phone, that's great too. You want to start digitally and end digitally, fine. You want to start digitally, come and visit us at our office, and then go back to the digital method, that's fine too. The point here is you, as the person interacting with the company, should determine how you interact with us, not the other way around. The company shouldn't drive that.
Shouldn't drive that.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely.
Great.
So you think that led a lot of where you prioritized those initial
Goals.
goals?
That's always been our guidepost. Along the way, it's had many ancillary benefits to our internal employees, making their work more interesting, more productive, etc. But we still have some work to do internally because our focus really has always been on the person outside our company interacting with us.
Yep.
We changed that a little bit as we're coming into 2019, and now we're focusing a little bit more on some of those internal mechanics as well, just to bring some higher levels of productivity
Yep.
to our organization, but never losing sight of, the consumer, the broker, the realtor, the builder, the general contractor, all these different actors that are often involved in our transactions.
Thinking a little bit more about the experience specifically, I think what I'm taking away from our conversation is that while digital innovation can do a whole lot for you, you have to remember that it can't be 100% digital, right? That there are still going to be other mediums, other forms, and you've got to kind of map out that journey and take those into account.
Yeah.
And I think the light bulb that went off for me is sort of this: make it seamless. I should be able to pick up, put down, pick back up, any number of times across the various mediums.
Correct, and as you well know, and this was one of the places where, Tallan was part of the driving force that really put a great architecture in place for us, where not only is it the customer drives, or the actor who's ever interacting with us drives when and how they interact with us, but also on what device. PC, fine. Laptop, fine. Smartphone, fine. If all you've got is a Kindle e-reader, quite honestly, the system you helped us put in place, Tallan helped us put in place, it'll work on that too. So not only do you determine when and how you want to interact with us, but across any device that you may have, it'll work. As long as you have an internet connection, you can get to us and you can interact with us.
Yeah.
If you want to interact with us digitally.
Right. In thinking about consumers a little bit more, there's going to be quite a demographic, especially in mortgages, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anybody of any age, with the means can apply for a mortgage. How do you adjust or design for that, knowing that, are there considerations to be made that you've got a more tech-savvy crowd, you've got a less tech-savvy crowd, but in between all that, there's some pockets of using technology,
Right.
comfort levels.
Right.
What would you say people have to think
Well,
about?
what's interesting, I think, in the universe that we operate in today, generally, age is not the driving factor about whether someone's going to interact with us digitally or not. It really is a comfort factor with the transaction. So if you have previously experienced a mortgage transaction, maybe you bought and sold a home once or twice in your life, you're going to be more likely to feel comfortable interacting with us digitally. It's familiar.
Yeah.
There's a lot to understand in a mortgage transaction, but you already have a fairly good baseline. If you're a first-time home buyer, first mortgage, certainly the statistics show you're going to do your research online, but pretty quickly during the process you're going to drop to an offline transaction. You're going to want to see or speak with someone. But then in some of our businesses, particularly our renovation business and our construction business, once you have that comfort factor, you're going to come back into the digital realm and you're going to start again interacting with us digitally, simply because it's much more convenient. So if you're doing a renovation loan, let's say the kitchen is being updated and you need to approve the general contractor to receive some funds, you get that alert on your phone, you look at the pictures, you say, I agree, you're going to do it right on your phone, and you're going to feel comfortable doing that on your phone. It's a familiar interface for you, because that's how you're operating in the rest of your business as well.
That makes sense. Yeah, so different demographics, psychographics, everybody in between. You've got a borrower, you've got a contractor, all these different parties coming together, and you're trying to find sort of that sweet spot.
Right.
And balance it out.
Right, exactly.
You also have a big focus in your wholesale business on the brokers and correspondents,
Right.
And that is more of a B2B scenario. Do you think there's differences when designing for B2B versus B2C?
It's a good question. So the technology needs to be super user-friendly. At the point where you have to go think about how you're supposed to get something done, if it's non-intuitive, we've missed the mark. And I think that's the same whether you're talking about a direct-to-consumer transaction or a transaction with still somebody who is on the B2B side. I mean, it's still a person, and you've got to keep it intuitive. We can take some shortcuts when we're dealing with mortgage professionals, because this clearly isn't their first or second or third time. This is their 200th time or 2000th time, right? So we can take some shortcuts and use vernacular that we might not be able to as easily use in the consumer space. But other than that, the interfaces need to be intuitive, the system needs to guide them through it, and we try to stay away from jargon even in our business-to-business space, because sometimes there might be a regional variation or something that might not be clear. So we even in that space, we try to stay away from that jargon.
Do you think there's a subtle difference in maybe on the consumer side, like you said, take it a little bit slower and be more helpful on the business-to-business side? You've got a professional, so like you said, not their first rodeo,
Right.
and then money's on the line, right? Because if I'm filling out a mortgage application, if it takes me an hour, a couple hours, if it's my first one, it takes me a week. It's my time, and I can
Sure.
decide whether that's frustrating or not, and how much I want to put up with it. But ultimately, it's my inexperience with it that's probably causing the delays, rather than in my comfort level, rather than
Right.
the bank or the provider. Whereas on the B2B side, you're providing a service, and that service needs to be more efficient, or as efficient as possible, because for your brokers and correspondents, there's a volume number they're
Sure.
probably trying to hit as
Sure.
well, right?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point, and I think the other thing to keep in mind when you're in the B2B space is that there's different levels, right? So there may be a salesperson that's dealing with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 transactions with us simultaneously. They have a management structure that maybe has 20 deals with us, and then above them, maybe at the company level, maybe they have 50 or 100 deals with us. And so delivering the right information to those different actors at the right time is important. But even there, we use the same theory of letting them drive how we interact with them. So by that I mean we have the subscription model. The individual, as they come onto our system, they elect how they want to be communicated with, email, text messaging, what they want to be notified about, what events, and then within that, how do they want that aggregation when the event happens, weekly summary, daily summary. So we try to use this methodology where we let them drive how the interaction happens. Right?
I really
Put
like
them
that. I was
center.
thinking earlier how, it was challenging because we've got all these sort of dimensions converging on
Right.
that perfect experience, and oh my, how do you nail that, where what you're saying now is we don't have to nail it. We have to just give people options, and as long as they can almost tune the system to whether it's
Right.
notify me ASAP, notify me at the end of the day, or notify me at the end of the week, as an example, you've given me, the user, that ability to control that, and I've sort of made the software my own.
Absolutely.
In a way.
But underneath all that, not to toot your own horn, but underneath all that, you have to start out with an architecture, and Tallan was immensely helpful in helping us think through these dimensions. You have to think through an architecture that enables that, and that also ensures that you deliver the right information to the right people. So again, we have all these privacy and security issues we have to be concerned about, and so we want to make sure that we're giving the information to the right person that they should have access to. And again, that comes back to, fundamentally at the design stages, when you're thinking through all this,
Yeah.
you need to partner with someone who's, to
Been there,
use
done
your expression, been to the rodeo a couple of times,
Yeah.
somebody like Tallan, that
Yeah.
was helpful for us to
Yeah,
think through.
especially on the security side. I
Yep.
mean, obviously that's hugely important, and what I'm seeing here is on the B2B side, you don't have control over the organizational structure of your business partner, business clients, right? And so you kind of have to adapt, or make the system be able to adapt to their org structure, right?
And let them drive it. So,
Yeah.
the process, the system we put in place lets the administrator, as we call them, in that partner organization, and we have over 1,000 partners in that partner organization, set up the system for themselves, for their organization.
Yeah, perfect. Empowerment.
Yeah, exactly.
Inevitably, when you're thinking about change or innovation, change happens, and change can be scary for some people.
Right.
I just wanted to ask you if you've come across that, and if you guys had to think about change management, and how do we innovate? Because if we don't innovate, we're going to get disrupted. But if we want to innovate, how do we innovate at a pace that doesn't necessarily scare people away?
Yeah, it's another great question, and I don't know that there's a perfect solution. I think a couple of things. There is only so much absorption of change that can be pushed out and readily accepted at any one time, right? Particularly if you're thinking about the the B2B space where you have repetitive transactions. So they're expecting that the system that they logged into yesterday is generally the same system they're going to log into today, because they're taking shortcuts too, right, to get their job done as quickly as possible. And if you keep changing that system, it's disruptive. On the other side, there are demands in the marketplace that we like to react to. So we run our organization completely agile, where every 6 weeks we have a release. And so on the other side, we're trying to be as reactive and receptive to comments and suggestions from our partner network, from our customers, from our employees, and make the system better over time, right? And so you have to sort of balance all of that very carefully. And in the mortgage industry, there are times when the mortgage industry is very busy. So springtime, there's a lot of home purchasing going on. We're going to be busier than in December, when things sort of slow down a little bit. End of month, when you're trying to close a lot of loans, tends to be a busier time. So you have to be cognizant of all of this, and just try to always strike that balance. Part of it, though, comes back to that intuitive nature, right? So can we make the system as intuitive as possible, so that when I log in today and there's a new feature, if I need that feature, it's obvious to me that that feature is there and my need has been satisfied, and so I don't object to the change as much, right? On the consumer side, it's a little bit easier, because the consumer is going to do a transaction with us, and then hopefully 2 or 3 or 4 years later, when they're ready for their next home, they'll do that transaction with us again. But it's going to be a long time till we see them. Where on the partner side, hopefully every day, multiple times a day, they're working with us.
Yeah. So do you think it's an element also? I mean, the point you mentioned about being aware of when they're busy and when they can consume change, right, is important. Is there also an element of maybe broadcasting and kind of giving a heads up, if you will?
Sure.
This is coming?
Yeah.
Get everybody warm. No surprises, basically, right?
Yeah, I try to stay away from that word training, and the reason I try to stay away from it is because training implies a level of complexity where it means maybe the system wasn't as intuitive as it should have been or could have been, and that's obviously...
The iPhone didn't come with a manual.
That's right. Still doesn't. Right. But there is an aspect of information that we want to make sure partners understand. These things are changing. Here's how they're changing. We debate internally. Sometimes we might preserve an old, sort of call it the classic view, and the new view, and let people decide how they want to migrate. That has some pros and cons to it, and there are some cost implications there. So all of this has to be kind of carefully thought about as you're going through that change management process.
Yeah. Very cool. Kind of looking, I guess, back in hindsight, if you had to do all of it all over again, is there anything you do differently?
Yeah, I mean, there's always learnings to be had, right? So I think one of our learnings is when we started this, we started on the direct-to-consumer side. And what happened as we started on that side, the indirect channel, the wholesale channel, or broker and correspondent channel, the system that we were on was not going to be able to support us on the go forward. And so we initially had not planned in the first year or two to really touch the broker and correspondent side, but rapidly it became apparent to us that we needed to re-architect and reinvent that system as well. So then we started with 2 projects, and they ran, although they shared many components, particularly on the security side and the data model side, although they shared many components, on the UI level and some functionality level, they were very different. And we ran that way for a couple of years, only to realize that although there are differences, they're more similar than dissimilar. And so with Tallan's help, we converged those and now have just one system to support. So, long-winded way of saying, if I had to do it all over again, we should have built one system from the beginning, not had 2 systems that we then had to
converge.
converge into
Merge,
merge into one system.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think that's my.
No, that's great. And that's what I want to do is give anybody listening some of these ideas. Obviously,
Sure.
like you said, we all can learn.
Yep.
And this is an opportunity for everybody else to learn,
Right.
from our experiences.
Right.
I wanted to transition more into a technical discussion. And I still remember the day when we, were initially starting off the project, and your words of wisdom were, if you don't have to buy another server, you'll be a very happy man. And so that really gave us no choice but to think cloud and leveraging the cloud, which we would have recommended anyways, but it sometimes is not as easy a conversation, especially in regulated industries. What, if anything, what gave you that confidence so early on that the cloud was the way to go?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'm not sure it was confidence. I'll come back to that in a second. I can say that throughout my career, whenever I've had to come in front of a business audience and talk about infrastructure, HVAC, power distribution units, delays because of server issues, it distracts from what we're really trying to accomplish, which is advancing the corporate goals. So I wanted to figure out a way, I was searching for a way to try to not have those conversations anymore, to take very valuable business time and focus on capabilities and discussing capabilities and sequencing of capabilities, not talking about, premise security systems or racks or any of the other myriad of things you have to talk about when you're running data centers. And the cloud had increasingly emerged in 2014, 2015 as a potential solution to that. And we were fortunate, again, that Tallan had significant cloud expertise, and when we started to talk about that, we said, okay, if we put everything up in the Microsoft Azure cloud, you won't have to build any servers, you won't have to worry about building a data center, and you can spin up and spin down capabilities very quickly, right?
Right.
Push of a button, server's provisioned, we can experiment, take that server down very inexpensively. I don't have to worry about capital expenditures and all this sort of stuff that you get into. And so that's been for us, it's been a huge differentiator and has allowed, and I think will continue to allow, small and mid-sized businesses to compete with the big guys. I think to a certain extent, business has really changed. 20 years ago, you had to get big in order to have scale. And you needed scale because you had to bring down your cost per unit. It was just the fundamental nature. Well, today, you can be tiny, and by leveraging, the Azure cloud, you can be just as big as the big guys. You don't need to get big to have scale, because you get scale right out of the box, right?
Okay.
And so I think business has fundamentally changed in that regard. Now, to our discussion earlier, we're a highly regulated business and a highly regulated industry, and not only did we go to the cloud, but we went to the public cloud. Not only did we go to the public cloud, but we went to a multi-tenant public cloud. I mean, there was a lot of concerns that were raised.
People are going to wonder how you sleep at night.
Yeah, how do you sleep at night? And so I always answer it this way, and I recently had a discussion with a senior regulator on this point, we were having this very same conversation. And I said, fundamentally, who do you think is better at protecting and guarding the infrastructure? American Financial Resources, a mid-sized financial services firm, principally in the mortgage business, that maybe could devote 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 resources to protecting our infrastructure, or Microsoft, who has 10 times as many people thinking about protecting the infrastructure than I have in my entire company, right?
Yeah.
How many people do you really have that are capable well-trained, have the resources, and not only that, but when you're operating with a company as large as, say, Microsoft, they have access to the very senior levels at the FBI and NIST and all these places that, American Financial Resources, we wouldn't have access to those kinds of inputs, and even if we did, we wouldn't be able to digest them.
You're right. So they can get ahead of threats.
Exactly.
Right. You were talking about scale and some of the economics with the cloud, and we mentioned earlier the compare my rate feature, which it's an innovation, and it was on the consumer side, and this is applicable to probably anything consumer related, where the big question is how much traffic are we going to get, and I think what really helped us, being able to leverage the cloud. A, some of that wouldn't have been possible with an on-premise infrastructure, but B, just, to give you some cost ideas, right? We didn't have to go, we didn't have to worry about if when you do make the Today Show, do we need 10,000 servers ready to go?
Right.
Nor did you have to buy 10,000 servers in case there was a slight chance you might be on the Today Show, right? We could easily scale up and down, and you kind of pay as you go.
Right.
And I think that was, you get the benefit of, building with modern technologies. I think you get the benefit of some of these, you talked a lot about, I don't have to worry about HVAC or power going down, or, the sort of ugly costs of a data center, but there's also the other costs, which is the projection of costs and
Right.
The manageability, and making something ultimately that is profitable.
Right. I think two things. Number one, I'm still willing to go on the Today Show. I've not been invited yet. I'm still just willing to go. Just put that out there.
You're going to be heard.
Yeah, my mom would love to see me on the Today Show, I'm sure.
We'll go
together. The second thing I would say, it comes back to this notion of enterprise class applications. It wasn't too long ago, 4, 5, 10 years ago, where part of your cost-benefit analysis had to be, can we afford to make this enterprise class? Do we need to do that? Today, we don't have to worry about that. Just by being in the cloud, I know that I can scale, and I don't need to worry about scaling. Microsoft is monitoring my inbound traffic, and they know when another CPU needs to be brought on. They know when servers need to scale. They know when my database needs to grow. I don't need to worry about that, right? So on Super Bowl Sunday, I can just watch the Super Bowl, and if we ever have an ad on Super Bowl, I'm not going to worry about our servers falling over, because I know that the professionals are watching that, and the systems are watching that, and they're expanding and contracting as need be, right? And to your point about making it profitable, we know that the revenue will follow that scale up, and so if we have to scale up because more traffic comes into us, that's great.
That's a good thing.
It's good.
Yeah.
More loans, it's going to be more profitable. When the bill comes from Microsoft at the end of the month, it's fine because the revenue also is coming.
Yeah,
Right.
hand in hand.
Right.
Any technical discussion wouldn't be complete if we didn't kind of look forward and geek out a little bit and talk about what ultimately could come next.
Sure.
So we've obviously done a lot, I think even in the last few years, and using the Vision service to do the compare my rate, to read those loan estimates, even some of the speech to text and the Alexa skills that we've built.
Right.
But what do you see going forward? Any visionary thoughts?
Yeah, I think we're on the cusp of another dramatic revolution in the consumer space. So today, almost everybody is walking around in their pocket with a device that knows every place they've been, every search they've ever done, every email they've ever sent, every phone call they've ever made, every post they've ever done in social media, right? It's those smartphone, whether you're an Android person or an iOS person,
Yeah.
or what have you, right? So you're walking around with these devices. The artificial intelligence is getting smarter and smarter in the background. Our ability to consume big data is getting better and better. And so it's not too long, 3, 4, 5 years, where I think these devices will start to anticipate and deliver solutions to us before we are conscious of the need. So in our own industry, the example I like to use is a typical arc for someone is, they come out of school, they form a family, there's a child there, somewhere around age 4 of that child, when you're thinking about and realizing that they're going to go to public school next year or private school, you start thinking about where you live, and you start thinking about maybe moving to the better school district. And that's a conscious thing. And then you probably go to Google and you start researching neighborhoods, and you start researching lenders, and you start looking at houses, and you go through this whole process. And at the end of that,
Drives a lot of home buying decisions.
and it drives a lot of home buying decisions. Eventually, you come to us or one of our broker or correspondent partners, and you get a loan from us, and you're very happy, and your child goes to school. I think in the future, what will happen is you will come home, and the system will look at you and say, hey, Adam, I've been thinking about the fact that young Adam Jr. Is going to go to school next year. I think you might want to consider moving. Here are some neighborhoods that I think fit your profile based upon what I know about you, because I've lived with you since
Right.
you were practically
Been tracking you for a while
right?
now.
Tracking you for a while now. And here's some lenders that might be appropriate. Here's some loan options that might be appropriate for you. And so it'll deliver, rather than you having to go through this enormous process of figuring it out, it'll deliver 4 or 5 or 6 options to you, and then you'll choose amongst those options. And at the moment that it delivers those options to you, you will then become conscious of the fact that
Oh,
you-
yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Good
yeah.
idea.
Light bulb goes on. Good idea.
Right.
Right. So we've put our toe in the water with Tallan's help. So last year we built a skill on the Alexa app, because I think natural language processing is all part of that that place that we're going. I think keyboards will more and more disappear into the background over the next 3, 4, 5, 10 years. So we have an Alexa skill that you can ask it questions and it'll respond to you. So we put our toe in the water. The next kind of piece of that is maybe some chat bots that can answer people's questions if they're calling in or interacting with us digitally. I think the key for us there, we always want to be very upfront about these things, so it'll be obvious that you're working with a chatbot, and context is important.
Yeah.
And if you're calling in with an emergency, I'm not going to have you talk to the chatbot. You're going to go to a
Right.
person right
Right.
away, right? If it's an urgent issue. I think we've all had that.
Customer service.
Yes, we've all had that experience where you're running through the security at the airline, and you realize your flight's been canceled, and they want you to like authenticate yourself and tell me how I can help you, and it's just like, no, I need an agent right now, and that won't be the experience you get from AFR.
He'll be smarter.
We'll be smart
Yeah,
about that.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. It's a lot. It's exciting too.
Yeah, very exciting.
So just kind of wrapping up, we've started talking about how you guys shaped your strategy, where you decided to go. You mentioned ultimately investing on the consumer side and coming bringing up the B2B line as well.
Right.
We talked about technology and how cloud enables you to do all that. If you took it all in perspective, what do you think is, you mentioned it already, but I think what I love about your story is that it's mid-market competing and technology enabling the mid-market to compete. And sometimes, people are so enamored about the big brands, oh, Apple can do no harm. And,
Right.
and if somebody has a bad experience at Starbucks, they don't say I had a bad experience at Starbucks, they say I had a bad experience at that Starbucks.
Right.
Right, and they just go to the next one down the street because it's
Right.
better. And so there's a resilience to these big brands that's admirable. And sometimes in the mid-market, you feel like you're grinding it out, you're competing, and are you ever, do you ever have a shot at being, an Amazon or an Apple or a Starbucks? And yet, I think you've pointed out that it is possible. So I was wondering if you had any kind of parting thoughts about sort of that inspiration for mid-market, right, and what they could do.
And I guess for me, the question is, do you want to be? So I love it that at our company, I'm the chief operating officer. I don't have an administrative assistant. Right next to me at our offices, I sit next to the president of the company. She doesn't have an administrative assistant. If you call us, we answer our phones and we talk to you. If you send me an email, I'm the one responding to your email. And so I really enjoy that size organization. I don't know that I would be happy. I've been at those organizations where you're huge, and you lose some of that ability to interact directly with the consumer, and then you hear about people going on listening tours or going to go around and listen. I don't have to go on a listening tour. I hear from our customers every single day. And if I'm not hearing from you and you're one of our customers and you want to call me or you send me an email, that's fine too. I'd love to continue the dialogue and chat with you. And so I like our size company. So I don't aspire to be Apple or Amazon.
Yeah.
That size for that reason. That's just a personal decision that I've made, where I am in my arc of life. With that said, there's absolutely no reason, back to our point earlier, there's absolutely no reason why our company, mid-sized company, why we can't deliver the same solutions at the same enterprise class level as the biggest folks in our space. Absolutely no reason, hands down. Pick a great partner, like Tallan's been for us, to help guide you on that journey. Understand that as the future unfolds, be agile, be innovative, be willing to listen to your customers and your clients and make some changes along the way.
And learn.
That's great, and learn, always continuously learning. And it'll be a great journey. There's no reason why you can't do that in today's market space. You don't have to be big to have the economies of scale to be able to do these things. In fact, if you go all the way back to kind of our first chat on this topic, in fact, it's the mid-sized enterprises that I think have the most ability to be innovative today, because we can quickly try something. If it doesn't work, just back it out,
Yeah,
go on.
much easier.
Yeah, we can fail fast and move on, spin up a server, try something, okay, move on.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier for us than if you're at a much larger company, right? Turning the battleship, as they say,
Right.
can be tough.
Yeah, I think personally for anybody, for everybody, every instance of looking up at an Amazon, an Apple, or Starbucks, you can look down and you can see, Blockbuster, right?
Right.
It's certainly a big company at one point and doesn't exist anymore because it was, not keeping up, and somebody like Netflix could come around, and one day or at some point they were a startup and they were the small guy and then they were the medium guy, but
Right.
they fought and fought, and now,
Right.
they rule the roost.
Yeah, and it's that's a great case study, and the Blockbuster folks, smart folks, dedicated, but their industry got disrupted, and fundamentally they didn't. By the time they reacted to that disruption, it was a little too late.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a lesson for us all, right? Keep your ears to the ground, and if you think something might be disruptive, maybe it's time to turn it over, look at it, and experiment with it.
Or buy it.
Or buy it, yeah.
That's right. Well, on that note, we're going to wrap it up.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank-
Bill. Thank you
oh,
so
thank
much
you.
for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks, Adam.
Before those of you at home log off, please take the time to complete our survey and give us some feedback. See you next time.